I never thought that a simple vacation's end would be the moment my son quietly exiled me. The suitcases were the first thing I saw, even before the house. They sat on the front lawn like misplaced trash, one wheel broken, a zipper half open, exposing my nightgown as if it had committed a crime. Taped sloppily to one of my old art history books on top was a note in my son's handwriting. "Sorry, Mom. Wife's parents moving in. No room for you." No signature, no apology, not even a phone call. Just 7 words that folded my knees beneath me while the taxi idled behind me. Out of habit, not hope, I tried my key. It didn't fit. I stood there, hand on the knob like some confused trespasser who'd wandered into the wrong life. The porch light flicked off. The door stayed shut. No voices, just the neighborhood's quiet hum, and the sound of the sprinkler from next door. Only one person saw. Bill, the retired insurance adjuster from across the street, peeked through his curtains, then pulled them shut the second he saw me notice. Bill always did know how to disappear when things got uncomfortable. From my purse, I pulled out my phone and just stared at it. No missed calls, no texts. I'd sent a postcard from Cape Cod, for God's sake. Missing you both, with a hand-drawn doodle of a seagull. Missing me clearly wasn't mutual. That note wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't left by mistake. It was their final move in a quiet little game they thought I wasn't smart enough to notice. Just 20 minutes earlier, I had been sunburned, tired, and lighthearted. I'd even brought back that expensive saltwater taffy Jake liked from the shop with the long lines. I left it in the suitcase to melt. I didn't cry. I didn't knock. I just stood there long enough for the chill to settle into my back. A woman who had raised her son in that very house, who had rocked him through croup and colic, now standing outside like a forgotten guest. Then I called another cab. Not to a motel, not where they'd expect, but somewhere quiet. 2 weeks earlier, Callie was unusually kind that morning. She made pancakes, not from a box but the real kind with lemon zest and blueberries. She'd never cooked for me before. Jake asked if I wanted to use his travel miles. "You've earned a real vacation," he said, pouring my coffee like I was a guest in my own kitchen. "You deserve some time away from me. Take a break from all of us." All of us. That stuck. She said she'd found a rental on the Cape. Her parents had gone once, and it's quite enough for someone your age. She even offered to pay. Said it was a thank you gift. The reservation was non-refundable. I'll admit it, I'd been tired. The baby had colic. The house was noisy. A full night's sleep had been missing for months. But still something felt off. Too rehearsed. Too gentle. That same day, Jake brought up our joint bank account. The one we'd kept open since Harold died. Just for a little while. "Can you take my name off?" he asked without looking at me. "It's a tax thing," he said. "Temporary." That word again. Temporary. And when I got back from the store later, the alarm code didn't work. Callie blamed a glitch. She smiled too brightly, said she'd fix it, but didn't. And yet I went. I packed a bag, told myself they meant well, that it was just new parent stress. That I was imagining things. The odd glances, the over-explaining, the sudden overkindness, that it was love just awkwardly expressed. But when the taxi pulled away that morning and I looked back at the porch, neither of them waved. They just closed the door. I should have known then, but sometimes a heart takes longer to catch up than a mind. It had been happening for months, maybe longer. Subtle, careful edits to my presence, as if I were a draft they were preparing to delete. First, it was harmless things. My cast iron skillet was too heavy, so it ended up boxed in the garage. My sewing machine, taking up space, was tucked into the attic. When I asked about it, Callie blinked like she'd forgotten it existed at all. The shared coffee pot became a single-cup machine. More efficient, Jake said, though no one ever offered me one. My preferred tea vanished from the cabinet. The living room arrangement changed twice in 2 weeks, and each time the chair I usually sat in was pushed farther from the center. Conversation shifted, too. They began having them without me, quietly over texts and low murmurs in the hallway. Plans were made in real time with me still in the room but not included. I heard phrases like, "We'll have to check the nursery dimensions when her parents get here," or, "That room should be fine as a second office," followed by a glance in my direction and a quick subject change. I wasn't being mistreated. That would have been easier to name. I was being edited out with manners, with smiles, with "of course you understand." And I did. Eventually, I understood exactly. This wasn't thoughtless or accidental. It was a quiet exit strategy. Mine. They'd assumed I would leave with grace or guilt or shame. They'd underestimated the part of me that had been planning just as long as they had. I knew enough not to react when the bank questions started. When Jake asked about closing our old account, just to simplify things. Or when I noticed the guest room closet emptied and freshly painted, they thought they were subtle. They weren't. So I said nothing. But I began making a list, not of what they'd done, but of what they didn't know. And near the top of that list was one quiet, important fact. The house wasn't theirs to reclaim. They were slowly kicking me out of a place I never stopped owning. They probably thought I'd shuffle off to a motel, humiliated, clutching my suitcase and calling to talk things through. That I'd give them the satisfaction of a scene or maybe even an apology for making it awkward. Instead, I gave the driver the address to an apartment complex on the other side of town. He raised his eyebrows at the distance. "You sure?" I was. The apartment was small, furnished, and clean. I hadn't been here in over a year, but everything still smelled faintly like lavender and old paper. The curtains were still closed. My name wasn't on the mailbox. It never had been. The lease, the utilities, even the Wi-Fi, all filed under a trust Louise helped me set up back in 2017. Just in case, she'd said, and I'd laughed at the time. No one had laughed tonight. I dropped the keys on the entryway table and turned on one lamp. Then I sat at the desk, opened my laptop, and logged into the county property registry. It didn't take long. I knew the parcel number by heart. I typed it in. There it was, 14 Redfern Lane. The house I'd been living with them in. The house they thought was theirs to control, the house they'd staged their little exit strategy from. I clicked Edit Owner Details. The record still showed my name, full legal, unshared. Just as it had since I paid off the mortgage with Harold's life insurance in 2016. They never asked who the house belonged to. They assumed. That was their first mistake. I updated the online file with my current contact address, the trust address, not the apartment. Then I downloaded a PDF copy of the title and saved it 3 places. Old habit. The silence felt clean. No baby monitor static. No background TV hum. Just the light tap of the keys and my own breath. The house at 14 Redfern Lane had been mine since Harold died. I had paid off the remaining mortgage with the policy, transferred the title into my name alone, and filed it through Louise, who made sure it stayed protected. No shared ownership, no loopholes, no verbal understandings. Jake and Callie never asked about the paperwork. They were too comfortable assuming. And frankly, I let them. I lived with them. Yes, I helped raise their child, stocked their pantry, paid for upgrades they thought came from Jake's bonus. But legally, I wasn't their tenant. I was the owner, the only one. And now that they'd made it clear I was no longer part of the household, I intended to start acting accordingly. First step, reestablish paper control. I initiated an internal record update through the property registry portal, just enough to flag activity on the parcel. Then I logged into my personal trust management system, added a line item for the property, and set up alerts on the address. Any valuation checks, title searches, or lien requests would now ping me directly. People forget that property is a game of patience. You don't win with emotion. You win with proof. Then I emailed Louise and attached the updated documents. No commentary, just the file and a subject line. Redfern Lane active. 10 minutes later, she replied, "Noted. Let me know if you want to move beyond documentation." Not if, I thought. When? I didn't want revenge. That would have been easier, cheaper, and much faster. What I wanted was accuracy. For Jake and Callie to truly understand whose name had always held the weight. Not metaphorically, not emotionally. Legally. They thought I was vulnerable because I hadn't made a fuss. Because I never slammed doors or yelled. Because I kept showing up with groceries and folded laundry and a warm smile. They took silence for weakness. But silence is also a ledger. And mine was full. Let them play their little domestic power games. I'd already begun my own. And mine came with notarized pages and certified delivery. I sat in that apartment for a long time, long after the last email was sent. Not planning, not plotting, just thinking. What did I want? Not the house. That part was already mine. Not money either, though I could have made it about that if I wanted to. I had all the tools, all the leverage. What I wanted couldn't be measured in square footage or dollar signs. I wanted the silence to turn inward. I wanted them to feel it. The absence of me. I wanted Callie to walk into the kitchen and reach for the spatula I always used and realize it wasn't there. For Jake to open the pantry and find the coffee never refilled. For the baby to cry in the night and wonder why the house suddenly felt colder. I wanted them to experience the life they had made room for, fully, without me softening the edges. And then I wanted them to understand what they'd done, not just realize it but reckon with it. The decision they made when they chose performance over decency, convenience over connection. So I gave myself a window. 3 days. No action, no contact, just silence. Not because I was waiting to be asked back. No, that door was closed. But because I wanted to see if they even noticed what they'd lost. 3 days to see if a single message came through. If either of them could reach for humility instead of excuses. 3 days to prove they were still human enough to regret. If not, then the gloves would come off legally, cleanly, but not yet. I made tea, sat in Harold's old chair by the window, let the traffic outside pass like waves. My name was still on the deed. My lawyer was on standby. My patience, however, was not infinite. They wanted a house free of obligation, of complication, of extra personalities. I would give them exactly that, just long enough for them to feel the space they carved out. And then I'd show them what ownership really looks like. No calls, no texts, nothing from Jake, and certainly nothing from Callie. I didn't expect an apology. Not yet. But I thought perhaps I'd see a message slip through, a question, even a cowardly one. Where are you? Or, are you okay? Something that could pass for concern. Instead, I got content. Callie posted 3 stories on social media. One of them was a photo of the living room, the one I'd rearranged 6 months ago when the baby was first born. Except now my chair was gone, replaced with a rocking glider, pale gray, with a new knit throw across the back. The caption read, "Making space for family. 2 hearts. Hashtag fresh start." There were no signs of me. Not on the mantle, not in the background, not in the words. I stared at that photo longer than I should have. Zoomed in to check. The framed portrait of Harold and me, the one Jake had always said looked so classic, was missing. No mention of me anywhere. Just a second post of Callie's parents unpacking a car full of moving boxes. So grateful to have them with us. Couldn't ask for better support. Red heart. I closed the app. Silence has a way of amplifying what people say when they think no one is watching. And what they chose to share told me everything I needed. They hadn't noticed I was gone. Or worse, they had and they were relieved. Still, I didn't reach out. I didn't reply to the neighbor's vague text. Everything okay? I didn't call the house to check on the baby. I let the hours stretch. I cooked my own dinner that night. Quiet, familiar food. Nothing catered to someone else's preferences. I cleaned the kitchen slowly, then left the dishes out to dry. Before bed, I took out a small notebook from the desk drawer and wrote a single line. Day 1 they celebrated. Then I underlined it. Late that evening, as I sat in my apartment finishing the crossword I never had time for when I lived with them, an email popped up. One of those automatic alerts from a real estate site I hadn't thought about in years. Subject: Valuation request received, 14 Red Fern Lane. For a second I thought it was spam. Then I saw the details. The request had come through a portal I used once back when I'd briefly considered selling after Harold passed. The address was mine. Still registered under my name. And it was dated today. Request IP familiar. Too familiar. Jake's home network. Still saved in the system. I sat up straighter. Pushed the crossword aside. They weren't just rearranging furniture anymore. They were sniffing around the market value, trying to see what the house could sell for before they even bothered to ask who owned it. No lawyer, no official notice, just a quiet little online poke, like testing a fence before climbing it. They hadn't called, not to check in, not to talk, not even to ask what the hell happened, but they had time to run numbers on the house I paid for, the roof I repaired, the taxes I handled. Evaluation. They really believed it was theirs, or wanted it to be badly enough to skip the hard questions. I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel sad. I felt ready. I replied to the real estate site's confirmation email, reactivating the property listing profile I'd opened years ago. Adjusted the settings. Changed the status to active interest FSBO for sale by owner. I didn't publish anything. Not yet. But the account was live again. Then I added one line to my notebook. They've crossed from replacement into removal. Confirmed. This wasn't a misunderstanding. They weren't just building a new life. They were preparing to sell the one I gave them. And now they were going to learn what it costs to mistake silence for surrender. Especially when it's backed by legal ownership and a very patient woman who no longer has anything to lose. I logged into Zillow just after sunrise. The account was still active from when Harold and I considered downsizing. Back then it was a dream. A little cottage near the lake. Fewer stairs, more peace. He passed before we ever looked. I pulled up 14 Red Fern Lane and updated the listing status to for sale by owner. Set the price at $20,000 below market value. Just enough to get attention. Just enough to rattle someone who wasn't supposed to see it. I uploaded old photos, ones from before Callie repainted the nursery or moved in her parents' antique sideboard. Back when it still looked like my home. Within 2 hours the numbers started moving. 17 views, 5 requests for a tour. 1 cash buyer asking about quick closings. No marketing, no sign in the yard. Just a ripple in the digital water. And already there were bites. I didn't respond to the buyers. That wasn't the point. Not yet. The goal wasn't to sell. It was to send a message. To make them look at the computer screen, then at each other and ask what's going on. That moment of panic where entitlement meets reality. That was what I wanted. By mid-morning I received a second notification. Not from the real estate platform this time, but from the county title monitoring system Louise had set up for me years ago. External inquiry on parcel ID number 72619. Viewer unverified. Private user. IP matches previous access. Jake again. No calls, no emails. But suddenly a whole lot of clicking. I made myself tea and watched the sunlight shift across the hardwood floor. Let them feel the walls tremble just a little. Let them wonder how much control they actually had and who might be taking it back. This wasn't revenge. It was exposure. I wasn't raising my voice. I was raising the temperature. Let's see how long it takes for heat to bring them to the surface. It came at 9:37 p.m. sharp. My phone buzzed with Jake's name. No emojis, no message first, just the call. I stared at it for 3 full rings before picking up. Not out of suspense. I just wanted to see if he'd hang up. He didn't. Mom, he started, breath tight, tone rehearsed. Hey, I think there's some kind of mistake. Silence. Then he coughed once and added, the house, it's showing up as for sale. I waited a beat, then another. Let him sit in it. No mistake, I said evenly. What? He almost laughed, but it died halfway through. I mean, someone must have hacked it, right? It says it's a for sale by owner listing. That can't be. It can, I interrupted. And it is. Pause. You can't just do that now. His voice was rising, thin with disbelief. I mean, you didn't even talk to us. I sat back in my chair, watching the streetlights blink against the window. Funny, I said. You didn't either. Wait. Mom, what is this? That was when I heard it. A shift in his tone. The first crack. Not anger, not outrage. Fear. He didn't know how much I knew. He didn't know what I had. He didn't even know still that the title was never his to begin with. I'm giving you a chance to ask the right question, I said, voice calm. Don't waste it asking why I listed the house. He didn't speak. I could hear Callie's voice in the background, muffled and sharp like she was reading something off her phone. Probably the listing. Probably the price. Probably counting what they thought they were owed. Is this about the vacation? Jake finally asked. About Callie's parents? No, I said. This is about a note you left on top of my suitcase. Mom, come on. I did. And I hung up. Then I wrote in my notebook, underlined 3 times, first crack. He called me Mom again. Callie didn't message me directly. That would have required humility. Instead, I woke up to an email with the subject line, "Let's talk urgent." It was long, dramatic, a little theatrical. She used phrases like unfortunate misunderstanding and breakdown in communication. She claimed, they never intended for me to feel excluded. That the lawn incident had been misinterpreted. Her favorite phrase was, "What's best for everyone?" In the middle of the letter, buried beneath the passive language and vague concern, was the real point. We were surprised to see the house listed online. Is there a way we can pause any decisions about selling until we've had a chance to talk as a family? And just below that, we're especially thinking about the baby's future in this home. There it was. The real leverage they thought they had. A baby and nursery, a future they now wanted to hang on to through guilt and sentiment. I read the email 3 times. Each pass made it more transparent. They weren't sorry. They were scared. Scared the game had flipped. That the woman they thought they'd pushed out the door had quietly stepped into the role of owner, seller, and decision-maker while they were still playing at being in charge. They wanted time. They wanted me still, but not me. Just the version of me that stayed out of legal documents and inside their boundaries. I didn't reply. Instead, I printed the email and dropped it into the folder Louise and I had started assembling. I highlighted every sentence that tried to reframe their actions as necessary or accidental. I flagged the part about the baby's future because now they were trying to make this emotional, and I wouldn't give them that. They didn't think I'd take action. That was their second mistake. The first had been underestimating my memory. I don't forget who put suitcases on a lawn, and I especially don't forget who signs their name to that decision. Theirs may have been written in cheap ink. Mine was now being typed in legal font. I didn't reply to her email. I simply forwarded it to Louise with the subject line: responding party attempting to reframe displacement. Louise didn't call. She never called. She worked in writing because writing leaves records. Within the hour, she sent back a clean, formal document with her letterhead at the top and calm legal precision beneath it. Subject: Notice of revoked residency rights. Attached was the preliminary sale agreement I'd quietly authorized that morning. Not finalized, but real enough to rattle. Real enough to be enforceable. She included a clause referencing the informal note left on my belongings, labeling it voluntary forfeiture of occupancy by current informal residents, supported by written evidence and digital correspondence. I read every line twice, then I signed it. Louise was the kind of lawyer you never had to explain things to. She'd known Harold. She'd drawn up our original title protections in 2016 when Harold's name was removed. She was the one who suggested I keep quiet about the paperwork. Let them assume what they need to until they don't. She also reminded me once, years ago, politeness is not a legal boundary. This letter wasn't an act of aggression. It was a restoration of fact. It said, "You live in a house that doesn't belong to you." It said, "You removed the rightful owner and attempted to reassign value around yourselves." Said, "You're not victims. You're trespassers with a car seat." I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I simply printed the document, placed it in the same folder as Callie's email, and labeled the tab Phase 1 complete. They'd expected tears, maybe confusion, a voicemail full of tremble and betrayal. Instead, they were getting a letter from a woman with a title deed, a lawyer, and no intention of discussing feelings. I made myself dinner that night, opened a bottle of wine, and turned on a nature documentary. I didn't watch it. I just liked the sound of something alive and steady, the kind of sound you never notice until it's gone. I sent a message through Louise to Jake and Callie's shared email address. Simple, formal, and precise. You are invited to a meeting to discuss potential future claims on the estate at 14 Red Fern Lane. Date Thursday, 2 p.m. Location: Kendall and Mark's Notary Office. Room 3B. Documents will be reviewed and notarized upon conclusion. Please bring valid identification. I knew what they'd think when they read it. A compromise, a meeting, a second chance. They still didn't understand. This wasn't an invitation to plead. This was an opportunity to listen while sitting across from the woman they tried to erase in a building with marble floors and no patience for emotion. I arrived early. The notary office sat in a tidy beige building near the courthouse, neutral, quiet, and deeply unremarkable. Perfect. I brought the folder. The deed, the preliminary sale agreement, the revocation notice Louise drafted, and the note from the law now neatly laminated. I didn't fidget. I didn't rehearse. I wasn't here to perform. At 1:59 I heard footsteps in the hallway, slower than usual, hesitant. They walked in together. Callie in muted pastels. Jake in a shirt I recognized from last Christmas. He looked pale. She looked controlled, like she'd practiced keeping her voice steady. I stood when they entered, but didn't offer hugs. "Thank you for coming," I said. nodding toward the chairs across from mine. "We'll begin in just a moment." The notary entered at 2:03. She introduced herself, checked our IDs, then sat down with the clipboard of documents already prepared. Jake cleared his throat. "So what is this exactly?" I slid the folder across the table. Callie reached for it before he did. As she opened the flap and saw the first page, Purchase Agreement 14 Redfern Lane, her hand froze. She looked up. "You're selling the house?" "No," I said, calm and even. "I've listed the house. I'm here to finalize whether I go through with it." Then I added, still looking at her, "And whether either of you leave with anything but your shoes." Callie folded her arms as if that made her credible. Jake kept glancing at the documents, then at me like this might still be salvageable, like he could charm his way through paper. Callie started with performance. "You're tearing this family apart," she said, voice low and trembling in all the right places. "This isn't what Harold would have wanted." The notary didn't blink. She just uncapped her pen and clicked it once. I reached into the folder, pulled out the laminated note, and slid it forward. The one they'd left on my suitcase. The one with Jake's handwriting and Callie's tone. "Sorry, Mom. Wife's parents moving in. No room for you." The notary picked it up, read it aloud, and then placed it gently beside the purchase agreement. Her tone was neutral, practiced but final. "Legally, this qualifies as voluntary forfeiture of residential privilege. Combined with the deed and existing trust structure, the current occupants have no formal standing." Jake flushed. Callie blinked fast. Neither spoke. I leaned back. "You made your position clear," I said. "You just didn't expect it to be read into record." Jake started to say something. "We didn't mean," but I raised a hand. "I'm not here to be apologized to. I'm here to clean up the paperwork you created." Callie's voice cracked. "We thought you'd come back eventually, that this would blow over. It was temporary." "No," I said, steady. "Your note was permanent. You put it on the lawn." The notary slid a new form across the table. Acknowledgement of notification and relinquishment. The heading read. It gave them 7 calendar days to vacate or contest formally through court. Jake stared at it like it might bite. "I can't believe you're doing this," he muttered. I looked at him, not angry. "Just done. You handed me the pen. They thought they'd force me out of a house. What they did was write their own exit paperwork. All I did was show up and let the silence speak louder than their entitlement." It was raining the day I met the buyers. A young couple, polite, nervous, ready. They wanted to raise their family in a real home somewhere with history. They didn't ask why I was selling. They just said the kitchen reminded them of the one his grandmother cooked in, and the yard was perfect for late summers. That was enough. We met at the property with the realtor. The papers had already been drafted. I only needed to hand them the keys, sign one last page, and walk them through the fence line. I'd lived there over 20 years. I knew every creak in the floorboards, every fuse in the panel. As I passed the buyers the key ring, 3 copies all new, I heard a car door slam behind me. Callie. She wasn't dressed for weather. Still in her indoor flats, cardigan soaked at the shoulders. She looked out of place in her own driveway. "Where are we supposed to live now?" she asked. No preamble, no greeting, just a question, breathless and sharp, like I owed her shelter after all of it. I didn't answer right away, just held the keys out to the young woman beside me, who took them with both hands. Callie stepped closer, voice rising. "We have a baby. You know that. This is his home, too." I turned to her then, calm. "Probably the same place you expected me to live," I said. She blinked like the words hit her physically, and I meant every syllable, not out of spite but clarity. Because only now, in this final moment, did she realize what she'd done, not just to me but to herself. The buyer stood awkwardly by the car. The woman offered a quiet thank you and the man nodded, already looking at the front door like it belonged to them. It did. I stepped away without ceremony. No dramatic pause, no lecture, no second glance. Callie stood in the driveway behind me, soaking wet, still looking for room in a house she gave away with a single note. 2 days after the sale closed, she posted on Facebook a long, winding paragraph about unexpected loss and betrayal from those we trust most. No names, of course. Callie never risked specifics when painting herself as the victim, but the story was clear enough. An ungrateful mother-in-law, a sudden eviction, no warning. She even included a photo, a cropped shot of their now empty living room captioned, "We made this space a home." Some people only ever saw it as leverage. Comments flooded in. The usual mix. Sympathy from college friends, passive-aggressive cousins, a few vague Bible verses from an aunt who barely knew her. A few offered spare rooms. One even asked if she had a GoFundMe. I expected that. What I didn't expect was Mrs. Harper. She lived 2 doors down, 74. Lived in that neighborhood longer than all of us combined. She'd watched me raise Jake from a toddler. Watched Harold carry me across the porch the day we first moved in. She didn't comment often, but when she did, people paid attention. Her comment was just 2 lines. "No one forced you to put her suitcases on the lawn. Actions have consequences." It got more likes than Callie's entire post. I didn't reply. Didn't need to. The story had been twisted as expected. But not everyone bought it. Some remembered who baked pies for the block party every year. Who planted tulips along the sidewalk. Who had never asked for recognition until the day her name was scrubbed from her own walls. Let her spin whatever version she needed to sleep at night. Let the likes and sad face reactions pile up. The real record was already settled in signed contracts, bank transfers, and keys no longer in her hands. She thought social media could soften what she'd done. But once the neighbors know the truth, no amount of filtered lighting can clean the mess. Especially not when the whole block remembers who made the mess in the first place. The sale closed at $745,000. Cash buyers, no contingencies. They wanted a fast move-in, and I had no reason to slow them down. The transfer of funds hit my trust account by Thursday. Louise handled the details, double-checked the wire, and texted me 2 words once it cleared. All done. I didn't celebrate. I reviewed. I had lived in that house longer than I'd been married. Every cabinet, every window frame had my fingerprints, and Harold's too. But what they tried to take from me wasn't just a home. It was identity, belonging, the quiet confidence of knowing where you stand. They tried to reduce me to a guest. So, I turned the sale into something permanent. I opened a new trust account that same week. Not in my name, but in my granddaughter's. She's still too young to know what any of this means, but she'll learn. And when she does, she'll find her name attached to something that cannot be taken from her with a note and a lie. She'll gain access at 21, not a moment earlier. Until then, Jake and Callie are listed as excluded beneficiaries, legally barred, irrevocable. I didn't tell them. Let them figure it out the way I figured out I was being erased. Quietly. Through absence. Through what's no longer available to them. Louise added protections to the trust that can't be overturned without my signature and 2 witnesses. Everything is clean, above board, and final. This wasn't revenge. This was correction. The law isn't about feelings. It's about paper. They gambled on my silence, on my love, on the assumption that I wouldn't push back because I'm a mother or because I'm old or because I made their dinner every Thursday. They were wrong on all 3. When I closed that file, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished. I felt like someone who had walked all the way through a storm and now stood on dry land. Let them tell their version. Let them twist the past. The bank account says something else. A week after the sale, I heard Callie had moved back in with her parents. They never said where Jake went, only that he wasn't with her. I imagine pride made it impossible to explain why the house they'd bragged about for years now belonged to strangers. But word travels in neighborhoods like that, and some people still talk to me, even if it's just in whispered emails and quiet texts with subject lines like, "Thought you should know." Apparently, Jake lost his job. It didn't happen because of the house. Not directly. It happened because he'd used his company email to inquire about selling the property. A manager found it during a routine audit, forwarding title search links and estimated value reports on an address not in his name. It looks sloppy, risky. Technically, he didn't do anything criminal, but corporations don't like mess, especially not the kind tied to property disputes and half-truths. So they let him go. No fanfare, no drama, just another door quietly closed behind him. They thought they could treat me like a burden and still walk away clean. But entitlement leaves fingerprints, and theirs were everywhere. As for me, I bought a small house in Maine. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a vegetable garden I don't have to share. The neighborhood is quiet. No HOA, just a few retired folks. a library 5 blocks away, and a farmer's market that sells the kind of bread you don't toast. You tear. I sleep better now, not because I won, but because I stopped carrying the weight of people who only ever loved the version of me that gave without asking. They thought they'd evicted me. In truth, they freed me. I'd built a life around giving, supporting, making room for others. I didn't realize how much I'd stopped asking whether anyone would ever make room for me. Now I know the answer, and I don't need the house anymore to feel like I belong. I've got soil under my nails, paperwork in order, and nothing left that they can take.